Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock of Georgia.
Senator Warnock, thank you for joining us. And you also participated in our CAP Ideas Conference that we did earlier
twice today. I mean, it's my lucky day.
Well, ours as well, sir, given what's happening in Georgia. Record turnout in Georgia. Yeah. How are you feeling about specifically this state Supreme Court race? And, you want to make any predictions about the Democratic side of the governor's race? We'll take them at this table.
Punditry is not what I do. But look, the massive turnout that we're seeing, the historic turnout, that's good news. And quite frankly, it's the answer to, or part of the answer to what we're seeing with this voter suppression, with this awful decision, the gerrymanders that are happening all across the South. Part of the answer to that is massive turnout. The gerrymandering is based on predictions about turnout based on previous races. We've got to undermine that math, and I think we've got some real opportunities. I think the Republicans may have overreached here. And what you're witnessing is a kind of backlash. The voters are standing up. They're saying, you will not silence our voice.
They changed the rules, Alicia, in Georgia. The governor did. So the Democratic counties, the ballots don't say if the candidate is Democrat or Republican.
This gerrymander, what's at stake for your constituents?
So what was that?
What is at stake for your constituents?
In terms of gerrymandering?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, look, we're seeing a massive, devastating assault on voting rights. It's hard to overstate it. I mean, we've got Section 2 with this gerrymandering. But prior to that, the legacy of the Roberts Court, in a real sense, is the dismantling of our electoral system. The Supreme Court has done a lot of damage. This Roberts Court, Section 2 in 2013, Section 5, Citizens United, all of these things. We're not just talking about black voters. We're talking about working class voters, ordinary people, either through suppression or gerrymandering, which says that even when you show up, it won't mean as much. In a real sense, they're setting fire to the democracy, and the Supreme Court is pouring fuel on that fire, and we have to stand up in this moment. I'm proud of all that we did when I first entered the Senate. It was the 117th Congress. We passed a lot of legislation. We cut child poverty by 40% for 6 months. We did infrastructure. We did, clean energy, the biggest clean energy bill in human history. Whole lot of good coming right out of the pandemic. I have to tell you, looking at what's happening to our democracy right now, it was a mistake not to take voting rights first, to get John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act over the finish line. I'm proud of all that work we did. If I could, I'd trade all of that for the democracy, for the people's voices.
Because at the end of the day, if you can't vote, none of the policy matters.
Yes, right. But it sounds like you're endorsing getting rid of the filibuster. I just want to, that's the point.
Yeah, but you got to get the Senate to do that.
Yeah, well, we had every Democrat on that bill, on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement bill. It passed the House. At the end of the day, it was literally 2 senators, neither of whom is in the Senate now. And I think the caucus is on board. If we are so fortunate that the people will put us back into power, we owe it to the people to give them their voice. That's basic. It's foundational. And no arcane Senate procedural rule should block people's ability to be heard in their democracy.
You talk about the caucus, the Democratic caucus for sure, but then there's also the Congressional Black Caucus, which, going back to what you were saying about they're putting a lot of gasoline on the flames. Well, a lot of members of the CBC could be burned in this.
Yeah.
You've got a potential crisis, as noted in Politico this November. Upward of 19 members of the caucus, about 1/3 of its ranks, are at risk of losing their seats. A worst-case scenario could look like the complete erasure of black representation across the South, according to 10 CBC members who spoke with the Playbook. It's a generational moment, CBC lawmakers compared to the Reconstruction era and civil rights movement, and is testing how far the caucus will be willing to go to preserve their political might. Senator, we're talking about a Congress of the United States that could look the way it did in 1954,
right,
in 1945, in the South.
Yeah.
Where you've got a handful of black folk who are left over, whose state legislatures, I guarantee you, will redistrict their behinds out of office if they.
Democrat of Massachusetts is joining me now and surveying all of this. What do you think about this fundamental dynamic that we now have of Trump's grip on the Republican Party, sort of arguably stronger even maybe than it's ever been, grip on the country weaker, and what that means for what happens?
So it's a tighter and tighter hold on a smaller and smaller group.
Yeah. Yes.
So but that was really the point. I've heard the commentators say, and the people decided they didn't want to support Massey. No. Right. The people who showed up at a Republican primary decided they didn't want him to be their standard bearer. You know, if this had been an open, anybody votes. If this had been a general, I don't know exactly how that goes.
Right.
But I think this is the part. It's interesting to watch, and to watch what the dynamic will be on Republicans who say, man, I'm not crossing that guy, on the elected Republicans. We know who they belong to. But the reality is, we're 5 months out. We're going to have a general election, and boy, is that going to start shaking things.
So there's a bunch of cross pressure. I mean, right now we're already seeing the fallout in the Senate today.
Yeah.
Right. In a few different ways. I want to talk. One way was there was a war power resolution today. And for the first time, Democrats' party line, except for John Fetterman, have been voting for it. Republicans have been voting against it, except for Rand Paul. Those two have been switching. Today, Bill Cassidy, fresh off that loss on Saturday, crossed the line and voted with you and your colleagues to put it over the hump, which means it will now call a vote, is how I understand the procedure. What do you make of that development, and also what it portends for this Senate for the next 4 or 5
Well, could you say more clearly that if I'd been voting my conscience all along, I would not have been voting with Donald Trump?
Talk about a confession. I mean, it's really wild.
It's just like a moment of just now we can see what's really going on. And so you look at all the other guys who are still voting in line with Donald Trump. You watch these election results, and look, there's no voter who's going to be fooled after today, right? Is there anybody left who thinks that there is an elected Republican who is actually voting his conscience, doing what he thinks is best for all of the people of his district? How does he stand up in front of the electorate for the next 5.5 months as he faces the general electorate and say, you know what matters most to me? And with a straight face says, you, rather than pleasing Donald Trump.
Well, and I think there's a strange kind of coincidence of interest here, which is that both Donald Trump and I would argue the Democratic Party probably want it to be the case that voters understand that Donald Trump is the Republican Party and the Republican Party is Donald Trump.
Well,
I mean, at this point, right?
I mean, that's reality. We'd like people to understand reality. But here's the thing. What Democrats will do now and are doing already is they are both going after Donald Trump. Remember, the man who said, what would he do? He would lower costs on day one. And where are we on cost? Cost of groceries is up, cost of gasoline is up, cost of health care is up, cost of utilities is up, cost of housing is up. And he told us he would keep us safe and stay out of wars. And you can do your own count on how many he's in, but what I know he's
might be
spending,
another one in Cuba, who knows?
That's right, $1 billion a day to kill people halfway around the world, and still can't explain how that helps one single family here in America. So we're going to stay on that, but here's the other half. We're also going to be making the affirmative case. And that's not just he sucks.
Right.
Our case is going to be, here are the things that we'll lay out that we will commit to get done that will affect your family, that will lower your costs. I think that's going to be the key.
I want to talk about that contrast, but I want to stay on for a second on the way that he is using taxpayer money and pushing them. I mean, because now you've got this I think this ballroom thing is really wild, right? I mean, originally it was, I'm raising private funds. Now it's, I must have $1 billion. He's monomaniacally obsessed with it. Over the weekend, the Senate parliamentarian, for somewhat complicated reasons, stripped out the ballroom funding out of the bill. They want to pass on a party line vote to begin with, right? They're not consulting you. There's no negotiation on this. And Trump is so obsessed with this. I mean, it's all he talks about, really. He did an event today about it. He calls up Thune, Senate Majority Leader, to basically say you should fire the parliamentarian. And he wants to get this through. But this just strikes me, I mean, when you're talking about this contrast of, like, what they stand for, like, they're spending $1 billion in the guy's ballroom as people's groceries, as all their costs explode. It is an opportunity to be like, well, here's what we would do with money.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that really is the heart of it. Donald Trump has now said, with the cameras running, nah, we can't do childcare. Right? We can't do that because we got this war to fight halfway around the world.
Yeah, he literally said that. That's not I want to say that's not a gross mischaracterization.
That's right.
Explicitly what he said.
He literally said it.
Yeah.
He spends hours, right, online doing memes about the war or about Donald Trump in a triumphal arch or in a made-up AI thing where he's floating in the reflecting pool. He spends hours on this. He spends energy on this. He talks about the ballroom. And where is he on your groceries? Where is he on the fact that your utilities are up 67%? Where is he on the ways that his own policies, his tariff policy, his energy policy, his healthcare policy, and his war?
Some say President Donald Trump and the Republicans, they just lost a big control of the Senate because of the candidate President Donald Trump chose to run against James Tallarico. What do y'all think? Do y'all think the Democrat got a chance to take Texas? We are talking about Texas, the Republican Texas. Do y'all think Democrat got a chance? We know that some Republicans, they do not like these candidates that President Donald Trump chose. They will have preferred the old one. They will have preferred the old Republican to run against James Tallarico. The President Donald Trump, he just pulled it out and said no. Even this new guy, that most Republicans, they do not really want him to run against James Tallarico. The Republicans, they are saying that all out. They told President Donald Trump and Democrat right now, they are happy that he chose this guy against James Tallarico. But do y'all think Democrats, they got a chance? That's why some are saying that President Donald Trump and the Republicans, they just lost the control of the Senate. And this is going to change everything. Y'all know this is a game changer. Y'all know what this is, a game changer. And I believe the Democrats, they are thinking big because of what happened in Georgia. We remember that everybody thought Republican going to take it. Boy, last minute, everything just changed and Democrat took over. So that's why we see everybody, especially the Republicans, they do not want this to repeat itself. That's why they want the whole Republicans that's going to speak to the Republicans in Texas. But since President Donald Trump went the other way, do y'all think Democrat got a chance? We don't know. We just do not know it. But what do y'all think? Drop your comment. I will catch up with you guys in the next one.